Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice, and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Each episode is a conversation with inspiring people who make wonderful contributions to our knowledge in these areas and spark curiosity and ideas to pursue. Join me, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
I think being candid with your clients about the size of a challenge, their expectations, what they can hope to achieve, what it's really going to take to achieve the growth they're looking for or the behavior change they're looking for. Over time, you build much, much more trusted relationships where you're not always selling advertising. You're actually giving advice. And it's entirely fair then with the client to say, well, the value of our advice is as important as the product of any advertising that comes from that advice.
Hi there, Innovator. It's really great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. And I hope you enjoyed my recent conversations with Sarah McIntyre of Bright Inbound and with Kathy Saylett from Performance of a Lifetime. I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today as my guest, Murray Streets. He's the Managing Director of digital marketing agency BC&F Dentsu. As an agency leader, Murray is committed to promoting the creation of an always learning culture to enable the teams he leads to do their most effective work for clients. BC&F Dentsu aims to be distinctive in all they do and have an impressive list of clients as well as recognition from a wide variety of industry groups. A quick promotional message from our sponsor, that's InnovaBuzz, where we help coaches and consultants build professional credibility, engage their target audience, and connect with their ideal client. That requires absolute clarity about who your ideal clients are and how you can help them. To help you get that clarity about your ideal client, take a look at our Marketing Master mini class, where in less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity on your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. Access the Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. In our discussion today, Murray talked to me about what makes an advertising message distinctive, what makes it stand out, and what makes it engaging. He explained why it's important to focus on real, measurable results, not on vanity metrics. And he shared his suggestion of finding opportunities by identifying unmet needs or a job that is hard. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Murray Streets. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the InnovaBuzz podcast from Auckland in New Zealand, Murray Streets, who's the Managing Director of BC&F Dentsu, which is an integrated marketing agency with a purpose to redefine value by being distinctive in all they do for their clients and their people. Welcome to the podcast, Murray. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest today.
Hi, Jürgen. Thanks for having me on. Excited to join.
Now, Julia Streets, who's your sister, who was also our guest on episode 174 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a chat with you and introduced us. So big hello to Julia.
Thanks, sis.
Now, as I said, one of the things at BC&F Dentsu that you're really passionate about is the belief that distinctive works and also about being effective above all else. So your aim is to help your clients win, keep and grow customers, which is something that I'm really keen to follow up on with you as well. I think that, sort of winning customers is one thing around marketing, but keeping customers and also growing opportunities with the customers that you already have relationships with is really important as well. Now, before we start talking about all things marketing and advertising and things that are distinctive and effective, give us a little bit of a snapshot of your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the big moments in that journey?
Yeah, happy to share that. My journey to where I am today was pretty unexpected, I think, and maybe that's true of a lot of people in my field or line of work. Is that we didn't necessarily set out expecting to work in advertising. We somehow came across the profession. But I'm originally from the UK. I've been in New Zealand 16 years. I actually studied classics, Latin and ancient Greek, and I have a degree in Latin and ancient Greek from Cambridge University, and I was dead set on becoming an academic. And then after I left university, I became a high school teacher, sort of Mr. Chips, and I sort of taught high school Latin and ancient history and a little bit of modern languages to boys in Nottingham. And then I took my first leap and jumped into advertising in London. And so left teaching with no job to go to and managed to sort of blag my way into an advertising agency and joined a strategy department in Publicis in London. And I worked there for 4 years, and then I met my subsequent wife. We were engaged, and then she had been completing her overseas experience. It was in her 7th or 8th year of living in London, and she was ready to go home. And I was ready for an adventure. So I took a second leap, and I leapt to New Zealand with no real understanding quite of what I was getting myself into, but landed in a very nice part of the world, and in an industry that was really thriving and exciting and very hands-on, and was a little different to the very staid corporate advertising world of London that I'd worked in. And I found myself sort of thriving in that. And then I sort of took a third leap, which was I was sort of progressing as a strategist, and I'd become a head of department. And then I actually realized that I was really enjoying the business of advertising and building client relationships and advising them on strategy. And I really enjoyed leading people as well. So I started to foster an ambition to lead an agency, which is something I've had for a few years. And then last year took on the managing director role at Barnes Capner & Friends Dentsu, having worked at FCB in New Zealand, and before that at Saatchi's for just over a decade.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey. I'm curious how your experiences in Latin and the classics, and then teaching, how you ended up in advertising as your kind of first transition there.
Well, somebody's always said that it's due to the influence of a good or a bad woman, but my girlfriend at the time was a WPP fellow in London. So she had applied for a fellowship at WPP and was moving around the organisation, and she'd done a stint as a planner at Ogilvy in London. And I was itchy about moving on from teaching, and I thought about being an officer in the army, and I'd almost done that. I thought about being a corporate lawyer, and I'd sort of had a poke around what that might mean. And in the end, I guess she thought that it would suit my temperament and some of the way I thought. And she said, look, it's the intersection of commerce and creativity. You're quite a creative sort of person by background. You're into culture. You're into what makes people tick, albeit 2,000 years ago. Why don't you give it a go? So I started sort of tapping into her colleagues and heads of department and meeting them for beers and bribing them with beers in English pubs and giving them my CV and saying, do you think I could make a move, or do you think I'm crazy? And they said, well, look, you've got some transferable skills. You might need to do some time in research first, or you might get lucky and get into a strategy department. So when I moved to London, I was looking at both options, and I managed to be taken on as a junior strategist on the Renault account at Publicis London.
Yeah, fascinating. So I guess we can explore a little bit what some of those transferable skills are, but it just goes to show you that basically, you know, what it comes back to, whether it's marketing or advertising, anything that involves dealing with people and relationships, and I guess leadership falls into that as well, is, you know, there are transferable skills from all areas of study.
Yeah, I've certainly, I think, become a big believer in that. I used to think that you had to be a deep specialist, and therefore I sort of taught myself out of the ability to sort of fulfill some of the things I wanted to do. But the more I think as I've got older and wiser, and maybe also become a parent, I've sort of realized that actually generalism is a very good thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of the things that BC&F Dentsu talk about is distinctive work and being distinctive and standing out. And we had a brief chat prior to recording about kind of the noisy marketplace. So tell us a little bit what you understand by being distinctive and how can you use that to stand out in that noisy marketplace.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a very simple philosophy around understanding the nature of the way human brains work, really, and how they've evolved. And there's a whole raft of deep science out there that suggests that the human brain has evolved to always be alert to the unexpected and be primed and biased towards things that stand out in the environment, because those are the things historically as sort of early man and woman we've had to think about taking note of. And that wiring in our brain persists despite our clear sort of rational capability as human beings. And we're able to, I think there's a wonderful quote, which is, we're not rational, we just think we are. And I think that's very true, that we often as marketers and often as business people and perhaps even entrepreneurs, and many of your audience may become so seduced by the nuts and bolts of their product and their service that they forget that they're marketing it to very lazy brains, to brains that want to be terribly efficient, not expend that much energy, and therefore using techniques that allow you to stand out and position yourself and cut through are more important than ever, despite the change in technology and despite the rise of digital disruption. And I guess when we think about category that we operate in, which is the advertising agency category, it's an oversupplied market. There's lots of confusion in the market. Advertising agencies aren't very good at branding themselves. We haven't done a great job of differentiating ourselves. So as I've come into this role, what we're really trying to do is double down on this idea of distinctive works. We know that it's a very effective way to both capture attention and start to change behavior and change buying behavior, as well as social behavior as well. But it's also a way for us as a B2B business to actually try and stand out with our potential pool of clients as we market ourselves versus some very, very big competitors. We're only 25 people at BC&F Dentsu, so we're a smaller agency, but doesn't mean we can be less distinctive in the market. In fact, we need to fight harder to stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a fascinating challenge. And I guess one of the things for an advertising agency, to me, there's probably two things there in terms of marketing yourself and gaining attention. And the first one is, well, I guess three things. Let's say first one would be getting in front of the right audience. But the next one is then identifying whether those people understand that there might be a need or not, because one of the options they have is, no, we don't need advertising at all. And then the third one is those that have made the decision, yes, we need some advertising or marketing support. How do you stand out as the people best suited to meet their needs?
Yeah, that's right. You can break it down into various stages. And I think because the BC&F of BC&F Dentsu was an independent agency that was founded 10 years ago by a couple of fairly prominent guys in the local market, we're fairly well known as a brand, but our challenge is to actually demonstrate that we can be as effective as some of the larger agencies, if not more effective, because we offer a much lighter overhead, a nimbler way of working. And actually what we're trying to do at the moment is explore different methodologies that, certainly from my experience, when you sit in a big entrenched advertising agency, everyone wants to talk about change, but it's very difficult to change these oil tanker businesses that need to feed the machine. So that's kind of the challenge that we've got.
All right. Now, one of the things that you talk about is having an always learning culture, or building that always learning culture. And I think, you mentioned a moment ago how with a small team, you can perhaps offer some advantages over the big players in terms of changes and flexibility. So how does that learning culture play into that, and what are some of the features of that within BC&F Dentsu?
Well, I think one of the things we've really trying to sort of build up within our own culture is this idea that people can grow and progress as their best selves within the business. One of the disadvantages we have as a smaller player is that we can often be preyed upon by the bigger agencies for our talent. So it's a war for talent. And so we've got to really create a culture where people feel like not only can they be themselves, but they don't have to conform to some stereotypical image of what it means to be in advertising, but that they also are clear that they're growing and learning and being stimulated, so that they don't feel that sense of, oh, I better go and do my time in a big agency. And we have people sort of drifting off, and we've got this constant churn, which sort of defeats some of our proposition and our value to clients, which is we have a tenured, senior, very experienced team that are able to achieve things quite quickly for clients.
That's a really good point. How do you deal with that challenge of, the big agencies looking around and saying, "Oh, there's somebody we've identified that's a star performer, and we might lure him over to the big agency that has lots more resources." Yeah, and basically buy him out of the organisation.
There's definitely not a simple answer to that, but I think what you have to do is be very, very conscious about your connections with team members, a sense, and making that connection as personal and professional as it should be, so that they know that you know what makes them tick, what their ambitions are, and you can be very, very candid with them about, as the business develops and as they achieve goals, there's a very clear reward, a sort of achievement and reward structure. Because what I have found within the bigger agencies is that whilst the promise of a bigger canvas to work on and bigger clients, there's also a lot of places people can be forgotten in, and there are corners that people get left in. And so I think a lot of what I do in my role, and this is something I had to do moving out of being a sort of, I guess, a senior strategist and a chief strategy officer or a head of department, was worry less about strategy and worry more about people. And that's something I've had to be really, really conscious about in the last 11, 12 months since I've taken on this role.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, the other question that comes up there is, with a small group, how do you keep it fresh, and how do you kind of bring on new people and new ideas and maybe train them up, and at the same time retain, that breadth of experience and depth of experience that you've built up with the people that you have had there for a long time?
Yeah, it's very much a balancing act of making sure that whilst people have been in a business a long time and they're valued, they don't get complacent either, and that they retain that hunger to keep that. That's why we talk about always be learning. There's just an expectation that it doesn't matter where you are in this industry. You can be grey-haired like me and have done whatever I've done, but I'm still learning. And actually, I could be learning off the most junior person in the organization who knows more about the social media channels that they're particularly working on a project from our media team, when I don't use those channels and I wouldn't have the foggiest idea, and you certainly wouldn't want to let me loose on advising clients how to use them. Would be the fastest way to lose the account. But I think everyone can learn from everybody, and that's a big mantra I've always had, is that whether you're surrounded by good people, bad people, good bosses, bad bosses, you're always learning. You can always be learning either what not to do or what to do. And if you're really conscious about that, I think you can accelerate and really take on more and more challenge. And that doesn't mean you have to keep chasing the next 2-year placement at another agency in pursuit of variety.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, often, I mean, you mentioned earlier, in a big agency, there's lots of places you can get lost and overlooked, even though you might be performing as your best self. At the same time, the grass is often greener on the other side. But the idea of really keeping those relationships deep and also continually learning and challenging, I think that there's a lot of value in that. And certainly if you've got a learning culture, people feel fulfilled in that if they're a good match for the culture.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. So You've talked quite a bit about, the personal side of the leadership, or the human relation side of the leadership role you're now in. How does that play out in interactions with your clients? Well, first of all, in interactions with your clients, and then we'll come back later to the second part of the question, which is building advertising and marketing campaigns that actually start those conversations that lead to relationships.
Yeah, I think it has to characterize the way you behave with your team. Shouldn't really be any different from the way that you engage with clients. It's not like you have one way of operating within the business and another way of sort of putting on a show for a client. I like to think that our clients at BC&F Dentsu, and in fact clients that I've worked with over my career as I've grown more confident, have known that they certainly don't get spin from me. They will get high integrity advice and a point of view. It won't always be a point of view that they agree with. It's at their discretion to disagree with it, and then we'll move forward from there. But they don't pay me to just execute blindly or ask my teams to execute blindly what they do. They might as well in-house the service and the capability at that point. It's the old, you don't have a dog to bark yourself. I've worked for many clients who unfortunately have tended to say that and then still behave that way, and that does come with personalities and the ways people like to work together. But I think being candid with your clients about the size of a challenge, their expectations, what they can hope to achieve, what it's really going to take to achieve the growth they're looking for or the behavior change they're looking for, over time you build much, much more trusted relationships where you're not always selling advertising. You're actually giving advice. And it's entirely fair then with a client to say, well, the value of our advice is as important as the product of any advertising that comes from that advice. And the two don't have to follow on. So you could just be giving clients a very strategic point of view. And we're not always saying, and therefore we'll only tell you what we're going to do because then we'll be able to convert it into some production and some advertising. Because that's kind of the old business model of advertising, and that worked very well for several decades. But the world isn't like that anymore, so we need to adapt.
Yeah, well, I think that's consistent with what a lot of my guests have been saying on the podcast in relation to a whole lot of areas where you're not selling the product that you've actually got. You're selling a transformation and an end result, and an after state that your client is looking to achieve. So if you can give them that, the tools that you use to help them achieve that are not really that relevant. So that's not the tools that you're selling.
Yeah, that's right. It's an end state focused conversation, and by understanding that and being committed to that, I think you're trusted to apply the tools that you think will help them achieve that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you do put together an advertising campaign for a client, I'm sure there's a lot of great new technology available these days that you can use that wasn't available to us a year ago or 5 years ago. And certainly if you think of, doing online social media and videos and live videos and examples like that, which were probably not around 2 years ago and so on, how do you kind of keep up to date with those new technologies? And at the same time, how do you make sure that human element, the emotional connection and the relationship part is still front and center?
I think this is the nub of where the industry is at the moment. And it's certainly a very live conversation. The Australian market is live in New Zealand and the UK, and which is how do you get the balance right between being alert and open to the new that technology affords us, but not pursuing innovation to the point where it's not proven or effective. And it's about kind of setting the graphic equalizers on your campaign to the right settings. That's how I always think about it, is that an integrated approach is key. It was very fashionable in advertising circles 3, 4, 5 years ago to sort of declare that the traditional media were well and truly dead, and it was only going to be the Facebooks and the Googles and the digital platforms that could build brands. I think some of the data that's been coming out from a number of sources demonstrates that probably isn't as true as we might have liked to have believed it was. So we do need to get that balance right. And really it comes down to understanding what is the task for communications, spending time sweating the problem, understanding whether communications is the right tool to solve that problem. And then if it is, how can we use audience analysis and insight to really understand what are the channels and the moments and the contexts in which we should reach people with the message, with the creative. And then it's about being open to ensuring that whatever creative we produce is fit for channel. It's not just, oh, well, we came up with the 60-second script and now we just play that on Facebook or we just stick that into YouTube. There are countless case studies of people committing those sins, and it's still done today by relatively lazy either agencies and clients and organizations. So we tend to go through a very diagnostic process of really trying to put together the strategy, the insights, the media strategy, the creative strategy, and then it all fits together in an integrated way. And we put measurement in place as well. So part of the distinctive works proposition is that effectiveness is right at the beginning of the conversation. You're only standing out to create a result. We're not standing out because we want to win award shows for the sake of award shows to show off to our mates, which is one of our founders' beliefs in the agency. It's quite nice. They say, we believe in the power of creativity to solve problems, not show off to our mates. And that's something everybody in the agency believes. And that's part of why they come to work here, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. I mean, people these days are really seduced by the, I call it the vanity metrics a lot. I've got so many likes on Facebook, or this ad's had so many views on Facebook, and yet, the really key thing is, if it's an ad on Facebook, is, well, how many people actually got in touch with you as a result?
Yep.
And how many of those people turned into business? Because if 10 people or 100 people got in touch with you, but none of them turned into business, well, then the question in my mind is it attracting the wrong kind of people?
Yep.
Unless, of course, your conversion skills are pretty awful. But
woeful.
Yeah,
that's right. You just have to be very, very careful. But as you say, the vanity metrics, or it's often referred to in advertising as the intermediate measures. So everyone got terribly excited about likes and followers and forgot that actually we're in the business of that interaction, and that engagement had to turn into conversion. And if it doesn't follow through to that behavior change, then sorry, but you haven't been effective. So
that's right, yeah.
No matter how many views you can say at a barbecue you got, hand on heart, you haven't really grown your client's business.
Yeah, that's great. Now, having said that, just to stand out for your mates isn't a real good objective. You have received quite a few awards for your work recently. I think there's about 4 that you list from 2019. So that's, clearly you're widely recognised in the industry. But the key thing there is the results and some of the clients you work with, because I'm guessing that, these large corporate clients that you've got listed there are not likely to be satisfied with, we got 100 likes on that Facebook ad or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're either working with clients for long-term sustained effectiveness, because the other thing about brand building is that it doesn't happen overnight. So again, you've got to get your performance marketing balanced with your brand building marketing. So how are you building sales for tomorrow as well as harvesting sales for today? And you've got to get that balance right. And a lot of our clients, we're very fortunate that they believe, the likes of Sabara and Meridian and Qantas, they believe in the power of building and getting the balance right in the activity between future-proofing tomorrow or next year's sale, as well as converting the available demand in the market within a quarter or within a sales period. And I think the one thing I would note about perhaps the awards that you mentioned, Jürgen, is that we really try to focus on awards where we have to make the case for effectiveness. We've been very successful at building a body of work that's been peer reviewed on the basis of our results, and the data and the analysis that we've been able to pull together with our clients, whether that's New Zealand Marketing Awards or whether it's the Effectiveness Awards at a regional level or at a local New Zealand level. And those are really the awards that we really focus in on as a culture, because they become proof of our ability to build brands and drive sales and change behavior. And those are things that we can use in new business as case studies, as don't just take our word for it because we're another advertising agency, but here is a body of proven peer-reviewed work that we've done.
Yeah, well, that's certainly one of the values of having those kind of awards that are pretty well an outline of here's the case study, here's the outcome, here's how we measured it and how we demonstrate that we've achieved that outcome, which, it comes back to what you were saying earlier about being distinctive and measuring the effectiveness. So it sounds like all of those measures that you're using in the projects are actually ones that you use in these case studies as well.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll often those will often be third party, because both our larger clients will have independent agencies that will do their brand and communications tracking, or we will, where we have a smaller client, we might commission some independent research to pre and post benchmark what the behavior or the attitudes were and the perceptions and how those are shifting over time. So whilst we can also we can look at those longer term shifts, we can also correlate those with some of those intermediate measures, which, if they're taken in a balanced scorecard, can demonstrate the flow through of effectiveness. But if we were just to focus on, oh, look, Facebook's gone crazy, it's just not robust enough as an individual metric on which to hang effectiveness. It's simply it should be a stepping stone to other behavior changes that we can pick up over the longer term.
Okay, now you mentioned, putting together these case studies that kind of double as entries into these awards, but also as good case studies and testimonials for your own marketing. So what kind of other things do you do to market yourself?
It's a very good question, because, of course, we're essentially a B2B services business. And I think one of the things I've reflected on through various agencies I've worked at is that agencies aren't very good at taking their own advice. So we'll tell clients that you should be doing X, Y, and Z, and then actually we'll be fairly lazy and complacent about how we position ourselves, really thinking deeply about what makes us different, why we would be adding value to a client. I think a lot of what you have to do, again, there's no simple answer to this. It takes a lot of focus and energy, but you have to do it by design. And so we will do a combination of thought leadership. So I try to write regularly for both the trade press and also for the business press. So we try to get not only be present in the trade press where marketing clients are active, but we will also try and get into the wider business press through relationships with journalists at the New Zealand Herald, and try and provide content and points of view or interviews that actually build our salience in the market and our prominence and our top of mind as an agency that has a perception of momentum. We do quite a lot. We're very active in social channels, so in particular in LinkedIn, both on our BC&F Dentsu page, but then also through my personal page. I'm very, very active in sharing content that interests us, reinforcing the idea of distinctive works, sharing, again, thought leadership and what the agency is doing and achieving, and celebrating our people. And then I'm always looking for speaking opportunities. So I suppose today counts as one of those, trying to actually get out and join the conversation about what robust contemporary marketing and agency relationships should look like in a world of change and disruption. And what should we retain and what should we be open to changing and challenging ourselves around? So I'll just try and get out and bang the drum, and I try to encourage others in my sort of team to do the same. So they write thought leadership and they will provide content and do speaker panels on subjects that they're equally passionate about.
That's great. Yeah, I love the idea that you're getting out and about and the producing lots of content that really will help people in one way or another, and at the same time, like you say, position yourself as thought leader.
Mm.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of stuff around advertising and marketing and a little bit on leadership. I think it's a good point to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's probably a little bit around innovation and leadership.
Yep.
So it's designed to help our audience who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers that'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result.
Cool. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. First one, no wrong answers either. First one is what's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
My feeling on this is a whole bunch of things you could do, but I think it all comes down to, think very hard about your customer and your if you like, your audience group that you're trying to sell to or communicate to, and identify unresolved tensions or unmet needs. So really think hard about how their needs are not being met, or the job that they're trying to do is not easy to complete. Because I think if you don't do that customer research and insight mining first, innovation can exist for its own sake. And I don't think that's true innovation.
Yeah, well, that's a really wonderful point. We didn't really talk a lot about understanding customer before when we were talking about advertising, although you alluded to it a few times. But I think, that's pretty clear here that looking at customer interests or ideal audience interests, what are their unmet needs, what are their frustrations in terms of something that's not working the way they want, and that's the clue for where you can do something to be more innovative. All right, now what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I think the very simple thing here, I just took action and I didn't get paralyzed. So I think it's very easy in the face of the word innovation to sort of freeze and go, oh my God, it's a huge mountain to climb. How could I possibly come up with something original? But I think when I think about trying to inspire our teams to come up with lateral solutions for clients, to do some distinctive work, to perhaps explore a new methodology and a way of doing something. So we're exploring building and design-led thinking into our methodologies that we'll offer clients. The key thing is not to build it up in your head, just to take action. Start the research, scribble the thoughts down, have the first meeting, badly express your vision for what you're trying to achieve, and get some people around you, and then just hold them to account and start.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. It reminds me, and I had this conversation this morning with Kathy Saylett, so that will be when we publish this, when the listener's listening, it will be the last episode. And on the idea of performance breakthrough, one of the things that she talks about in her book is to perform like what you are wanting to become. And the example she starts with is riding a bike. So you perform like a bike rider and eventually you actually learn how to do it.
Yeah. It's that thing that I think direct marketers have always known better than advertising people, which is that behavior changes first and attitudes catch up. So just do and be, and you'll soon go, oh, I'm being quite innovative. And you sort of become self-fulfilling.
Yeah. Okay, well, do you have a favorite resource that you use most often?
We have some specific IP within the agency that we use. From a business planning point of view, I've been using in my role the strategizer tools around the strategy canvas in particular. And I've also used a brand on a page to kind of define what makes BCF's brand at its essence. So I've used a couple of tools there as I came into the role and wanted to set a direction for the next sort of 3 to 5 years for the agency. When it comes to actually developing a creative campaign to take to market, I did develop and refine a methodology in my last agency called ideas mapping, which was about taking the initial concept that everyone, including the clients, kind of gone, I really like that angle. I really like that creative territory, that sort of route, that starting point. But I don't really know how that's going to turn up in the market. And it's a workshop methodology by which an integrated team can essentially map out the elements of a campaign, all with an eye to what are we ultimately trying to get people to feel, think, and do, and therefore drive effectiveness off the back of it. And it was a methodology and a playbook that I sort of developed, which I still use today.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of mind mapping, so it sounds a little bit like that, although it's probably more targeted to this advertising type scenario or planning scenario. And I love the strategizer tools too. We do a lot with empathy mapping, which is one of the tools in that book.
Yeah, that's a great tool. Actually, I've used that several times on slightly more digitally led and design led projects within agencies I've worked at. It's a great place to start. You just start with the audience and you have really honest conversations about where they're at and what they're thinking, feeling, doing, seeing, hearing. It's great.
Yeah. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
Communicate. I think one of the things I sort of learned the hard way, partly because I'm an introvert naturally. I grew up as a very shy child, and now I've become a learned extrovert in the advertising business, and I guess from being a teacher at the front of the class, is that if you let voids open up and fester, you just store up a whole heap of trouble. So whether it's good news, whether it's bad news, just declare it, think through how you're going to solve it, and keep moving and keep the communication going. Because if you sacrifice trust in a project, even within your own team members, let alone by the time you're getting out to a client, you're jeopardizing your chances of effectiveness and being successful.
Yeah, that's great advice. So communicate. And even if you've got nothing to communicate, basically communicate that, hey, there's nothing to report really. Everything's everything's
don't leave it to assumption.
Yeah. All right, wonderful. Now, what's the number one thing you think anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
I thought this was a good question, actually. I think, I guess I go back to my classical roots, and I think about the two statements that were on the top of the temple at Delphi and the oracle at Delphi, which the ancients used to go and visit for wisdom. And one of the statements was, "Know thyself." And I think self-knowledge and self-awareness are, and I guess it comes into this, really strong appreciation more recently of the role of emotional intelligence and the ability to understand how you are processing emotionally the world around you and how other people will be. And that self-awareness, I think, can make you very, very, very potent in the workplace today. And you can really stand out as somebody that actively listens, is present, and is also willing to admit their own vulnerabilities. And I think that's a breath of fresh air. And I have to say, within an advertising sector that can be a little A-class personality, excessive at times, it's kind of nice to meet people who are actually considered and thoughtful and don't always want to jump to the first solution because they're worried about not managing the silence.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that advice was around thousands of years ago, and it's still considered a differentiator.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, it comes back to the core elements of our humanity and what we need to be aware of.
All right. Well, thanks, Murray. This has been fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you and about BC&F Dentsu, and also maybe even get in touch and say thank you for what you've shared?
Oh, look, you can find us. You can find about the organisation BC&F Dentsu by just googling BC&F Dentsu. You can follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can also look at our company page there as well. Or you can contact me at murray.streets@bcfdentsu.com.
All right. And we'll have links to all of those locations in the show notes so people can click straight through. So what parting number one piece of advice would you like to leave the listener today, particularly in relation to being a leader in innovation and in their field?
I would say, building off that last point I made, you can't lead other people until you can lead yourself. So I think self-leadership and bound up in that is self-knowledge, and being really honest with yourself about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, knowing that it takes a sort of coalition of talent to achieve the sorts of things that today's world make very complex. Even communications has become way more complex than it ever used to be, just with the proliferation of channels and platforms and fragmentations of audiences. But you need to know that I always think that the era of the lone wolf and the kind of command and control leader is well and truly over, because you've got to have a coalition of talent to help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah, that's right. No, even when I was in my corporate career and I struck those people, I thought, they're dinosaurs. How come they're still?
Yeah.
How come they're still here and in influential positions? Yeah.
Yeah, it can be quite. It can strike you as quite unusual that people are still thriving in some of those senior roles with those sorts of attitudes. It's certainly I've seen that shift in agency leadership. Certainly the leaders that I sort of set out underneath on my advertising career journey were very, they were old school. They were from a different time and a different set of values and a different way of operating. And I sort of spent a lot of my time learning what I said I would not do if I ever got into a position where I would be leading.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Murray. Finally, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
I would love you to chat to a man called, I don't know whether you may have talked to him before, I don't know, but a man called Craig Hudson, who is the country managing director of Xero in New Zealand. And the reason I think he would be really fascinating to talk to is he is very vocal as a leader in the New Zealand market around protecting and changing the culture of SME business. Xero are, the accounting software business that's sort of been very successful out of New Zealand, and they're sort of growing in Australia and UK and US, and they've got big ambitions. But Craig has been very candid about his own struggles with mental health as a small business operator, and he's very passionate about supporting the entrepreneurs, the small businesses that are taking on an enormous amount of risk and pressure, and he's very prominent in the press at saying we need to promote healthier behaviours and support our small businesses, especially in New Zealand, where they say 96% of business is small business.
Yeah, that'd be a fascinating interview. So we might get an introduction to Craig and get him on the podcast and have a conversation around that, because I think there's, that is a really important topic, and we've got lots of issues in society as a whole around mental health, and one of the things that I think we need to try to change the whole conversation around is the idea of putting in place preemptive situations. We're talking now in exercise and dieting and healthy weight. We're talking now about, what can you do to not put on a lot of weight, rather than triage the situation when it gets too late. So, and I'd love to see the whole conversation around mental well-being start at that point, rather than triage when people get to the point where they're burning out, or the stress gets too much for them, whatever it might be that triggers something worse.
Yeah, that's one of the. It's a not-for-profit client that we have, but we've been working for 3 or 4 years with Movember in New Zealand around changing the culture around masculinity in New Zealand, which is very the man alone, the pioneering spirit, the I don't need to ask for help, its staunchness and its reticence, and those are killers as cultural attributes amongst men, and women are arguably better at it, communication, but men in particular are very bad at checking in and just staying connected and looking at some of those preemptive behaviors that could make a real difference. And so we do a lot of campaign work around promoting that culture change and help Movember every year try and really change the culture around that.
All right. Well, we'll reach out to Craig and initiate that conversation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today, Murray. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot about how your approach to advertising and your philosophy around constant learning helps not only your clients, but also your agency, and provides opportunities for the people within the agencies to be their best and be distinctive and serve their client the best. So thanks for sharing all that with us, and all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks so much, Jürgen. And likewise, I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and informative conversation with Murray and took something away from what he shared with us today. For me, the standout was the congruent message of being distinctive in what they do, what they publish, and in the results they achieve for their clients. I'd love to know what you took away from Murray's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Murray Streets. That is MurrayStreets, all lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Murray Streets. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Murray there, as well as links to the BC&F Dentsu website, to his social media pages, and the other resources that we spoke about in today's conversation. Murray suggested we have a conversation with Craig Hudson of Xero on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So, Craig, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Murray Streets. Remember to check out our Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. But most importantly, it will enable you in less than 30 minutes to gain absolute clarity about who your ideal client is and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. And if you'd like our help to go even deeper into marketing mastery, or our help with producing your very own podcast, even launching your very own podcast if you don't yet have one, then send me an email to jurgen@innovabiz.co and we can set up a quick call to have a short conversation and find out whether we're a good fit for one another. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got some more fantastic guests lined up, including Justin Blackman, brand ventriloquist, and Jason Van Orden, business and marketing strategist for thought leader influencers. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the InnovaBuzz podcast at innovabuzz.com/subscribe. innovabuzz.com/subscribe. Make sure you never miss another episode. It would also mean a lot to me if you leave us a review, because what you think matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, or questions you have, so go ahead and share them in the comments below the blog post for this episode. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBizz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.